The two vocabulary subjects with 12 key terms in this video might seem boring to some people, but they're essential. If you understand them, then the next two principles of business in this video will be a walk in the park to understand. The first 5 are the key costs in a business. Out of those, the first is cost of fulfillment, or COF. It is everything you pay to produce the product and deliver it. The second is cost of sales, or COS. It is what you pay your salespeople or copywriters, etc. The third is cost of fixed overhead, or CFO. These are things you have to pay for whether you make sales or not, like taxes, rent, etc. The fourth is capital accumulative costs, or CAC. It is all the things you buy permanently, like equipment and inventory. Now, although inventory may be sold, you always keep it as a sort of buffer. That's why it's permanent, I infer. The fifth is cost of taxes, or COT. It includes property taxes on your buildings, income taxes, and all other types of taxes. The remaining 7 terms are the types of profit in a NPGS business, as Ben calls it, which, I remind you, stands for Net Profit Generation System. In fact, every time I say business in this video, I mean an NPGS business. Alright, back to our 7 terms. The first is GP, or gross profit. It is the amount of dollars you get per sale minus the fulfillment cost. The second profit is gross profit accumulation, or GPA. It is the gross profit I just described minus cost of sales times the amount of sales you made per rollout. Note, a rollout is the majority of emails you send in a campaign. The third is GPP, or gross profit per prospect. It is the GPA divided by the amount of prospects you mailed, both those who bought and those who didn't. For example, if our GPA was $10,000 and we mailed 1,000 prospects, our GPP is $10. The fourth profit is gross profit per sale, or GPS. It is the GPA divided by the amount of sales of a campaign. So, with a GPA of $10,000 and 40 sales, our GPS would be $250. The fifth is total gross profit accumulation, or TGPA. It is the sum of all the GPAs of all the campaigns you run in your business. The sixth is net profit, or NP. It is the TGPA minus fixed overhead and gross accumulative costs. The seventh is net profit, or NNP. This is the net profit minus the cost of taxes, and this is what you get to put in your pocket. I think what helped me understand these principles most is retyping them as is in some cases, and in my own words in other cases. And I would suggest you do that too. To make it extra simple for you, I made a fillable workbook, which you may find below this video. Take the time to fill it out, and I sincerely believe there is a lot of a higher chance that you will apply what you learned here down the road. Chapter 2 summary is the key terms of the 10 NPGS principles. Now the other 2 principles will be a walk in the park if you nailed the first one, as I've previously said. to increase your profit, you must first know when you're even making a profit. That's why Ben gives us a simple formula to calculate how many sales we must make to get above the zero or break-even point. It goes like this. The critical sales rate equals the cost of sales plus the cost of overhead plus the capital accumulative cost and all those divided by the gross profit per sale, which, as we said earlier, is the dollars per sale minus the cost of fulfillment. For example, if 1 unit of your product costs $10 to produce and you sell it for $20, then the gross profit is $10. Next, if we assume that your costs are cost of sales $10,000, cost of overhead $1,000, and accumulative cost $500 per month, and if you insert all those in the formula, you will then see that your critical rate of sales, or the amount of sales you need to break even, is 1,150. Note, there's a contradiction in the book that says that gross profit per sale is gross profit minus cost of fulfillment minus cost of sales in one place, and that it's just gross profit minus cost of fulfillment in another. I guess what the author meant here is that cost of sales is included in what he calls the cost to fulfill the product. That's why he gives an example of cost of sales being 20 minus 10, and not 20 minus 5 minus 5, for example. That would actually be the second contradiction in the book. Chapter 3 summary is the critical sales rate formula. The success of a campaign, or, in other words, sales rate, depends on 4 factors. These factors are media, audience, promotion, and product, as we briefly discussed in Chapter 1. Ben likes to rate each of those factors on a scale of 0 to 10, and insert them in what he calls the sales rate formula, which is media times audience times promotion times product, which means the perfect sales rate would be 10,000. He also says that the break-even point is usually at 4,000, which is where you start making a profit. If one of them is a 0 though, all the others will be a 0 too, because when you multiply by 0, that's what happens. So, if we want to get a better and better sales rate, we must tweak each of them. Now, how do we know how good each of them is? Well, there's a whole chapter devoted to each of them further in the book. But, drawing on what I read until now, here's my short assumption as to what they mean, so that we may rate them. Let's start with media. Media is where you communicate with your audience. For example, radio, TV, or email. Some media will have a higher chance of having your potential buyers in it, and having them order. The more the media promotes sales, the higher the ranking. Then there is the audience factor. For example, birdbath buyers are more likely to buy a birdhouse than random people on the street. So, birdbath buyers would be rated higher. Next is the promotion, which means how persuasive your text is. The more persuasive, the higher the rating. And the last is product, which means how good is the experience of the audience after they buy your product. The more they return to buy, the higher the rating. Some improvement ideas for those are also mentioned in Content Lesson 4 in the previous video. Chapter 4 summary is the general sales rate formula. Did you get these 3 principles? Or are you a bit confused, just like I was, the first few times I read them? If you're a bit confused, I think the best way to really understand them is to rewrite or retype them, as is, or in your own words. Or maybe even apply them. For this reason, I made a fillable workbook for you. If you fill it out, I believe there's a higher chance you'll learn something. And hey, if after that you find this video helpful, feel free to check out the previous chapter or the next once it's published. Thank you for watching, stay awesome, and see ya, Improvementers. Bye-bye.